Do you honestly think that tying on a bigger hook automatically guarantees you are going to catch a bigger fish? Think again. What if I told you that your massive, heavy hook is the exact reason why you are sitting on the bank going home empty-handed today? Are your hooks too big to catch the cautious fish that are inspecting your bait right now? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to dive deep into a topic that completely breaks everything your grandfather taught you about fishing. We are going to expose the shocking truth about hook sizes, and I promise you, this is going to be a total game changer for your next trip. By the end of this video, you will finally understand the hidden reason why your float stays perfectly still while the fish are swimming right under your nose. I have to ask you right now, do you feel brave enough to ditch your heavy gear and try something completely different? Let me know in the comments if you think tiny hooks can actually pull in a monster. Before we get into the main details, let us set the stage and look at why this specific topic is so incredibly important for every single angler out there. For generations, fishermen have passed down the exact same old school rule. Big bait plus a big hook equals a massive fish. It is a belief that is burned into our brains from the very first day we pick up a fishing rod. We do this year after year, trip after trip, completely ignoring the fact that our local waters are changing. We stubbornly refuse to downsize because we are terrified of losing a good fish, or worse, we are afraid our buddies will laugh at our tiny gear. But the truth is, fishing pressure has never been higher. The fish in our lakes and rivers have seen every trick, every lure, and every giant hook in the book. They are smarter, they are more cautious, and they are punishing us for our stubborn habits. Let us talk about that typical morning at the lake. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The sun is just starting to peek over the trees. The water is perfectly flat like a glass mirror. You have your absolute favorite spot picked out. You cast your line out into the perfect depth. You sit back in your comfortable chair. You pour a cup of hot coffee from your thermos. You just know that a massive fish is going to take your bait any second now, but the minutes tick by slowly. Then an entire hour passes. The float does not even twitch. The tip of your rod remains completely, perfectly still. You might start thinking that the fish are just not here today. You might think the weather is wrong or the pressure is off, or maybe the wind is blowing from the wrong direction entirely. But let me tell you a secret right now. The fish are absolutely there. They are swimming right around your bait. They are looking at it closely. They are smelling it. They are inspecting every single detail of your setup. And then they are turning and swimming away. Why? Because right in the middle of your delicious bait is a massive piece of unnatural thick metal. Your hook is shouting a warning to every fish in the area. They see it, they sense the weight of it, and they know it is a deadly trap. Let us talk about where this massive obsession with giant hooks actually comes from. It usually starts with our grandfathers or the older guys who taught us how to fish in the first place. They always used to say that big bait and a big hook will automatically bring in a big fish. They would tie on a massive piece of thick, heavy wire, bait it up with a huge chunk of meat, and just wait. Back in those days, it might have actually worked perfectly. The lakes and rivers were completely different 50 years ago. There were a lot more fish in the water, and they were not nearly as educated as they are today. But we have held on to this old school rule for way too long. We walk into the local tackle shop and we naturally gravitate towards the biggest, baddest looking hooks on the wall. We think that if we use a tiny hook, we are only going to catch tiny, annoying bait fish. And this is a massive psychological trap that we all fall into. We are letting our own egos ruin our fishing trips. You want to feel like a big game hunter out there on the water. But the reality is that fish do not care about your ego at all. When you throw a giant hook into the water today, you are just ringing a dinner bell that sounds like a massive security alarm. Now we need to look closely at the actual anatomy of a cautious bite. Have you ever wondered how a fish actually eats its food underwater? They do not have hands to grab things. Instead, they use a vacuum effect. When a fish decides to test a piece of food, it opens its mouth quickly and sucks in the surrounding water, pulling the bait inside. This is a very delicate and precise movement. When you have a giant, heavy piece of metal hidden inside your bait, that vacuum effect completely fails. But this heavy hook acts like a lead weight. The fish tries to inhale the bait, but the heavy hook makes it drop right out of the water stream. The fish realizes instantly that something is very wrong. Real food does not weigh that much. Real food simply floats naturally into their mouth. Your heavy rig totally ruins the natural physics of how a fish expects its food to behave. By the time you notice a tiny bump on your rod tip, the fish has already tried to eat your bait, felt the unnatural weight, and backed off completely. This happens thousands of times a day on waters all over the world, and most fishermen never even realize they just missed a prime opportunity. We also have to consider the massive impact of modern fishing pressure. Think about your favorite local lake or river. How many people fish there every single weekend? Hundreds? Maybe even thousands over the course of a single season? Every single day, these fish are seeing lines, weights, and giant hooks dropping into their living room. They are not stupid creatures. Over time, they learn to associate certain sights and unnatural movements with intense danger. A fish that has been caught before, or watched other fish disappear, becomes incredibly paranoid. They will circle a piece of bait multiple times before even thinking about taking a bite. If your hook is large, shiny, and clearly visible, you are basically putting up a bright neon sign that says danger. 20 years ago, you could get away with sloppy rigs and massive hooks because the fish were not heavily pressured. Today, it is a completely different game. You have to adapt to the intelligence of the modern fish. If you refuse to downsize your gear and hide your presentation, you are only going to catch the smallest, most inexperienced fish in the lake. The real trophy fish will avoid your giant hook every single time. Let us break down the physical weight factor of the hook itself. When you are using live bait, like a worm or a maggot, the goal is to make it look completely natural. In nature, a worm falling through the water column moves slowly. It drifts with the subtle underwater currents. It wiggles naturally as it slowly sinks to the bottom. Now take that exact same worm and thread it onto a massive, thick wire hook. What happens? It sinks like a complete rock. The heavy metal totally overpowers the natural buoyancy of the bait. It plummets to the bottom in a straight, unnatural line. Any cautious fish watching this happen instantly knows that it is fake. Real insects and worms do not sink like heavy stones. Furthermore, once the bait is sitting on the bottom, a heavy hook prevents it from moving naturally in the current. It pins the bait down firmly. When a fish swims up to inspect it, they expect the bait to flutter or move slightly as they push the water around it. But your heavy hook keeps it dead still. You are completely destroying the natural presentation of your bait before the fish even gets close enough to take a taste. Here is a painful reality that we all need to accept. It is the heartbreaking spit-out moment. Picture this scenario. You are staring intently at your float. Suddenly it dips down just a fraction of an inch. Your heart starts pounding. You get ready to strike. But then the float pops right back up and stays perfectly still. Nothing else happens. You reel in your line and your bait is either completely gone or smashed to pieces. What just happened? That was a cautious fish picking up your bait. feeling the cold, hard, thick steel of your oversized hook, and instantly spitting it out. Fish have incredibly sensitive mouths. They can detect the texture, density, and hardness of whatever they eat in a fraction of a second. When they bite down on a giant, thick metal hook, their survival instinct kicks in immediately. They blow the bait out of their mouth faster than human reflexes can possibly react to. If you were using a smaller, thinner hook, the fish would not have felt the metal so easily. They would have swallowed the bait confidently, giving you the time you need to set the hook. Stop blaming the fish for being tricky and start blaming your hook for being way too obvious. Let us address the biggest fear that stops anglers from using smaller hooks. It is the absolute terror of losing a giant fish. You are probably sitting there thinking, if I use a tiny hook and hook into a massive monster, the hook is going to straighten out and I will lose the fish of a lifetime. This is a very common fear, but it is completely based on outdated myths. We are not living in the dark ages anymore. Modern fishing hooks are created using high-carbon steel and advanced forging techniques. A high-quality, thin wire hook today is unimaginably strong. Yes, it looks small and fragile, but the tensile strength is absolutely incredible. You can land remarkably huge fish on hooks that look like they belong on a keychain. The problem is not the size of the hook, it is the impatience of the angler. If you try to drag a massive fish out of the water like a tractor, yes, you might bend a small hook. But if you play the fish correctly, if you take your time, and if you use your equipment properly, a small hook will hold up just fine. You have to trust the modern metallurgy and stop letting your irrational fears dictate how you set up your fishing rig. One of the most important concepts you need to master is matching the hatch, but specifically for your hooks. Most fishermen try to match the hook size to the size of the fish they want to catch. This is completely backwards. You should always match the size of your hook exactly to the size of the bait you are using. If you are using a couple of tiny maggots, putting them on a giant hook is absolutely ridiculous. You end up with a huge piece of exposed metal that looks totally unnatural. On the flip side, you cannot bury a massive chunk of meat on a tiny hook either, or you will never get a proper hook set. But in difficult conditions with highly pressured and cautious fish, you must use smaller, more delicate baits, and small, delicate baits require small, delicate hooks. When you perfectly match a small hook to a small bait, the hook practically disappears. The fish only sees a free, easy meal. They do not see the trap. This harmony between bait size and hook size is the ultimate secret of professional anglers who consistently pull fish out of completely dead waters. Stop thinking about the giant fish you want and start thinking about the small bait you are presenting. Let me paint a picture of a real-life scenario that happens all the time. You are sitting on the bank, you have your heavy gear out. You have not had a single bite in 4 hours. The water is totally dead. Then another guy walks up and sets up about 50 feet away from you. You watch him closely. He casts out. 5 minutes later, his rod bends in half. He brings in a beautiful fish. 10 minutes later, he catches another one. You are sitting there getting incredibly frustrated. You walk over and ask him what magic bait he is using. He shows you his rig. He is using the exact same bait as you, the exact same depth, the exact same line. But then you look at his hook. It is incredibly tiny. It looks like a toy compared to the heavy iron anchor you have tied on your line. That is the moment of truth. That is the massive ego check every angler has to go through. That guy is not luckier than you. He simply understood that the fish were being cautious today. He adapted to the situation. He downsized his gear, hid his presentation, and he is reaping the rewards while you sit there, stubbornly staring at a motionless float. It is a harsh lesson, but it is one you must learn. Presentation really is absolutely everything when it comes to tricking smart fish. Let us think about a live worm again. When you put a worm on a heavy, oversized hook, you are basically killing its natural movement. The thick wire damages the worm severely. It stops wiggling. It just hangs there lifelessly like a piece of dead string. Predatory fish are highly attracted to movement. The subtle wiggle of a distressed insect or worm is the exact trigger that makes them want to attack. When you switch to a small, fine wire hook, the magic happens. You simply nick the hook through the very tip of the bait. Because the hook is so incredibly light and thin, the worm is totally free to squirm, twist, and dance in the water. It looks absolutely frantic. It looks completely natural and totally alive. This lively presentation is impossible to ignore for a fish swimming by. They do not stop to inspect it cautiously because it triggers a pure reactionary bite. The small hook allows the bait to do all the hard work for you. By reducing your hook size, you are massively increasing the action and the attractive power of whatever bait you choose to use on the end of your line. We really need to talk about line tension and the delicate pickup. When a very cautious fish finally decides to pick up your bait, they do it incredibly slowly. They take the bait in their lips and they start to move away slowly to see if it feels right. If you have a large, heavy hook attached to your line, it creates immediate drag and resistance. The fish instantly feels that something is pulling back against them. They feel the unnatural weight of the metal dragging across the bottom. The moment they feel that resistance, they drop the bait and bolt. You see a tiny tap on your rod and then nothing. But when you use a very small, lightweight hook, the entire dynamic changes entirely. A small hook adds almost zero weight to the bait. When the fish picks it up and moves, they feel absolutely no immediate resistance. It feels perfectly natural, exactly like picking up a free meal off the bottom. They confidently swallow the bait and swim away, which gives you a strong positive bite indication on your rod tip. You are totally eliminating the early warning system that saves so many fish from getting caught. Light hooks slip in completely unnoticed. Let us take another swing at breaking the hook bending myth, because I know some of you are still completely skeptical. You are looking at a tiny, fine wire hook and thinking there is absolutely no way that will hold a 10-pound fish. But you are ignoring the basic physics of fishing. A thick hook actually requires a massive amount of force to penetrate the tough mouth of a fish. You have to strike incredibly hard just to drive that thick metal past the barb. Often, you do not even get good penetration, and the fish shakes its head and spits the thick hook right out. A small, thin wire hook is exactly like a surgical needle. It requires almost zero force to penetrate deeply and securely. When you set the hook, that thin wire buries itself completely in the fish's lip with practically no effort at all. Once it is fully penetrated past the barb, it is incredibly difficult for the fish to shake it loose. The holding power of a fully buried small hook is vastly superior to a partially penetrated giant thick hook. You get a much cleaner, much deeper hook set every single time. Stop relying on brutal force and start relying on surgical precision. This brings us perfectly to the critical role of your reel's drag system. The only reason a fish can ever bend or break a hook is if you give them a solid object to pull against. If you lock down your drag completely tightly and try to winch a massive fish in, yes, something is going to break. But your fishing reel has a drag system for a very specific reason. When you use a small hook, you simply set your drag a little bit looser. You let the rod bend and absorb the heavy shocks. You let the drag click and give the fish some line when they make a massive, aggressive run. You take your time. You play the fish gently until it is completely tired out. If you do this correctly, a tiny, fine wire hook will never bend. The pressure is absorbed by the flexibility of your fishing rod and the smooth release of your drag. Tying on a giant meat hook is just a lazy way to avoid learning how to properly fight a fish. When you master the art of playing a fish smoothly, you realize that you never actually needed those giant heavy hooks in the first place. You become a much better, much more skilled angler overall. Winter fishing and clear water conditions are the absolute ultimate test of this theory. When the water gets very cold, fish metabolisms slow down dramatically. They do not want to chase fast-moving bait. They do not want to open their mouths wide. They become incredibly sluggish and ridiculously picky. Furthermore, in late summer or winter, the water often becomes crystal clear. Every single detail of your rig is highly visible from several feet away. If you drop a giant heavy hook into clear, cold water, you might as well pack up your gear and go home immediately. The fish can see it perfectly, and because they are sluggish, they have all the time in the world to stare at it and inspect it. This is exactly when downsizing is not just a good idea, it is absolutely mandatory. Tying on a tiny hook with a single maggot or a small piece of worm is the only way to get a bite in these tough conditions. The small hook vanishes in the clear water. The small bait looks like an easy, low-energy snack. Anglers who refuse to downsize in winter are the ones who complain that the lake is totally empty. The lake is not empty, their presentation is just far too aggressive. Let us talk about catching those incredibly annoying fish known as the inspectors or the nibblers. Every angler has experienced this deeply frustrating situation. You cast out a big juicy worm, your rod tip starts bouncing wildly, tap, tap, tap. You strike hard and you reel in completely empty. You cast out again, tap, tap, tap. You strike and half your worm is bitten off, but no fish. These are the cautious nibblers. They are grabbing the very tail end of your bait and pulling it, totally avoiding the giant hook hidden in the middle. They know exactly where the metal is, and they are playing a dangerous game with you. The only way to defeat these annoying inspectors is to switch to a very small hook. When you downsize, you can hide the entire tiny hook inside a much smaller piece of bait. Now, when the nibbler comes up to grab a quick snack, they inhale the entire package in one quick motion. There is no tail left for them to pull. They take the bait, the tiny hook goes right in, and boom, you finally catch the thief that has been stealing your bait for the last 3 hours. It is an incredibly satisfying feeling to finally outsmart them. We need to tackle the massive psychological barrier of showing up to the water with small gear. Let us be totally honest here. Tying on a tiny hook feels a little bit embarrassing when you are standing next to your hardcore fishing buddies. They pull out their massive tackle boxes filled with giant lures and heavy iron hooks. They look at your tiny little setup and they make a joke about you trying to catch tiny little panfish. It hurts your pride just a little bit. You want to look like a serious angler, but you have to ask yourself a very important question. Are you at the lake to impress your buddies with how big your hooks are, or are you there to actually catch fish? True confidence in fishing comes from understanding the environment and adapting to it perfectly. Let them laugh and make their jokes in the morning. When the afternoon rolls around and they have not had a single bite all day, while you are consistently pulling in beautiful fish one after another, the laughing will stop immediately. They will be quietly walking over to your tackle box asking if they can borrow one of your tiny little panfish hooks. Leave your ego in the truck. Let us take a much closer look at hook sharpness and how it relates to size. Have you ever taken a massive thick hook and tried to run the point across your fingernail? Unless you spend hours sharpening it by hand, a thick wire hook often has a surprisingly dull point. The sheer thickness of the metal makes it very difficult to manufacture a truly needle-sharp edge. Now take a small, fine wire hook right out of the package. It is terrifyingly sharp. It will catch on your skin instantly with zero pressure. This ultra-sharp point is a massive advantage when dealing with cautious fish. A cautious fish does not bite aggressively. They just mouth the bait very softly. With a small, ultra-sharp hook, that soft mouthing is often enough to prick their lip automatically. The moment they feel the tiny prick, they usually dart away, which actually sets the hook perfectly without you having to do anything at all. You get auto hookup simply because the point is so incredibly sharp and thin. You do not need to execute a massive, violent hook set that pulls the bait right out of their mouth. The small hook does the work silently and efficiently. Another massive benefit of downsizing that nobody talks about is bait longevity. When you are using highly delicate baits like live maggots, small soft plastics, or sweet corn, the thickness of your hook matters immensely. If you try to push a giant, thick piece of metal through a delicate live bait, you destroy it instantly. The bait bursts open, all the natural juices leak out immediately, and the bait dies within seconds. You are left with a sad, lifeless piece of skin hanging on a giant hook. No self-respecting, cautious fish is going to eat that trash, but when you use a tiny, thin wire hook, you can thread it through the delicate bait with surgical care. The bait stays completely intact. It stays fully alive and wiggling for a much longer period of time. It holds its natural shape and keeps its attractive juices inside. By keeping your bait in pristine, perfect condition, you are maximizing your chances of getting a strike from a trophy fish. You spend less time reeling in to change dead bait and more time actually fishing with a highly effective, natural presentation. This small detail dramatically increases your catch rate over an entire day. Let me introduce you to the micro-adjustment strategy. When fishing is incredibly tough and you cannot buy a single bite, most anglers do something drastic. They pack up all their gear and walk all the way to the other side of the lake, or they completely change their entire rig and start throwing entirely different bait. They waste an hour just moving and retying, but professional anglers do not panic like that. They know the fish are likely still there. Instead of a massive change, they make a micro adjustment. They simply cut off their hook and tie on a new hook that is exactly 2 sizes smaller. They use the exact same bait. They cast into the exact same spot, and very often, within 5 minutes, the float goes under. That tiny drop in hook size was the only change needed to turn a cautious refusal into a confident bite. It removes the heavy visual warning sign. It softens the presentation perfectly. This micro-adjustment strategy saves so much time and frustration. The next time you are struggling, do not move your chair, do not change your spot. Just quietly drop your hook size down and watch the absolute magic happen right in front of your eyes. It all comes down to a final realization on the water. Imagine sitting there as the sun starts to slowly set. You have spent the entire day testing this new theory. You watched your buddy completely fail with his heavy, old-school granddad rig. He spent 8 hours staring at motionless water, complaining about the weather and the lack of hungry fish. Meanwhile, you made the brave choice to scale down. You tied on that tiny hook. You perfectly matched it to a small, delicate bait. And you spent the day actively fighting beautiful, cautious fish that simply could not resist your natural presentation. You feel the deep satisfaction of knowing you outsmarted them. You cracked the hidden code. You realize that fishing is not about using the biggest, heaviest gear to bully the fish. It is about intelligence, stealth, and adapting to the situation perfectly. The proof is right there, splashing in your landing net. You will never look at that wall of giant hooks in the tackle shop the same way ever again. You have unlocked a higher level of angling, and your future fishing trips are never going to be the same. So let us completely wrap this up and look at what we have learned today. The days of simply throwing a giant meat hook into the water and expecting a monster fish to blindly grab it are totally over. Modern fish are incredibly cautious, heavily pressured, and highly intelligent. The most unexpected and profound turning point for any angler is realizing that you actually need smaller, lighter gear to catch the biggest, smartest fish in the lake. Downsizing your hook drastically improves your bait presentation, eliminates the unnatural heavy resistance that causes spit-outs, and completely hides your trap from wary eyes. It feels completely wrong at first, but once you trust your reel drag and modern hook strength, it will fundamentally change your entire approach to fishing. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. If this video opened your eyes and helped you rethink your tackle box, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. I want to leave you with one very important question. What is the absolute biggest fish you have ever successfully landed on the smallest hook? Tell me your best story down in the comments.